morning, everyone. Welcome back to another fun Sunday school. We have a lot to learn today. We are going to hear about Daniel when he's a much older man and he has a new encounter with a new king. But before we get to all that, there's some things we need to go over. First, if you want to watch this service in person, then you need to be at our fellowship hall at 10:40 a.m. on Sunday mornings. So how that works is you'll sit with your family at a table and you'll watch the service, and then you'll be in place for the 11 o'clock worship service. Now, if you're still not comfortable coming to church, that's okay, because we do offer this every Sunday morning at 10:30 or 10:40 on Facebook and YouTube. So you can watch any way you want. Now, if you hang around until the end of this video, you will get an awesome QR code that's going to unlock your family devotional. And in that family devotional, it's full of coloring pages and mazes and all kinds of fun sheets. If you are at church already, then you can pick up your packet of these fun sheets already printed out at the front of the church. It's in the basket with the crayons. At the end of the service, if there are extra sheets left over, please, anyone, feel free to take them and hand them out to maybe a neighbor or someone you know. So let's get started. Have you ever heard the expression, the writing's on the wall? It's used sometimes to describe impending doom or something bad that's going to happen. Did you know that that actually comes from today's Bible story? In the book of Daniel, chapter 5, we hear all about the time that a new king, Belshazzar, was throwing a party and suddenly a hand appears and starts writing something on the wall. We'll get to that later, but first, it's time for... That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, it is time for us to learn our memory verse. So we're going to have a memory verse challenge. We are going to learn a memory verse, learn some moves to go along with this memory verse, and then later on in the program, we're going to come back to this memory verse to see if it's stuck in your head. But first, let's read the memory verse together. Today's verse comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 5, verse 22. It says, "And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this." Let's jump right in and get started. So in the verse, it says, "And you, his son, Belshazzar." Belshazzar is a hard name to say, isn't it? I don't even know if I'm really saying it right, but that's what we're going to call him today. So let's get started. And you, his son. Now, are they talking about the sun in the sky? No, they're talking about a sun like, daughter and son. But our symbol today is going to be a sun like in the sky, so it helps us remember. So let's start. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all of this. Let's try it one more time. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, so you knew all of this. That's Daniel 5:22. Hey everyone, it's time to get out of your seat and on your feet, because today we have a special guest that's going to bring us today's wiggle break.
Hi, my name is Hunter Kier, and this is the wiggle worm. This is Hunter again, and this is the banana.
Thank you so much, Hunter. That was amazing. So if you would like to be featured during our wiggle breaks, then please have your mom or dad email me at ashley@columbiaum.org, and you can be our wiggle break superstar of the week. Now, let's keep that energy up and going with today's worship song.
Corinthians 10:31.
So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Oh, oh. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Oh, oh. Whatever drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Oh, oh. Whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do it all for the glory of God. Do it all for the glory of God. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Oh, oh. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Oh, oh.
Great job, everyone. Let's get to today's Bible reading. We are going to read from Daniel chapter 5, and we're going to start off at verse 1. It says, King Belshazzar threw a huge party for 1,000 of his princes, and he drank a lot of wine in front of them. While he was under the influence, Belshazzar commanded that the gold and silver equipment that his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem's temple be brought to the party, so that the king, his princes, his consorts, and his secondary wives could drink wine out of them. So the gold equipment that had been carried out of the temple, God's house, in Jerusalem was brought in, and the king, his princes, his consorts, and his secondary wives drank out of it. They drank a lot of wine, and they praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. Let's see what happens next.
Many years passed, and Daniel, now an older man, was still in service to the kingdom of Babylon, when a new king, Belshazzar, came into power. King Belshazzar decided to host a great banquet for thousands of his leaders. During the feast, King Belshazzar had his servants bring out the gold and silver goblets that his father, King Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. As the king and his nobles drank from these sacred goblets, they praised false gods. Suddenly, a human hand appeared, and one finger began to write on the wall right in front of everyone at the feast. As King Belshazzar watched, he began to shake in fear. The king called for his wise men and said, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means, I will give them riches and power." But the wise men could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. This made the king even more terrified. Hearing the commotion, the queen came into the banquet hall and said, "Don't be alarmed. There is a man who can help you. He was trusted by King Nebuchadnezzar because of his great insight and wisdom. So much so that Nebuchadnezzar put him in charge of all of Babylon's wise men. His name is Daniel, and if you bring him here, he will be able to tell you what this writing means." When Daniel appeared before King Belshazzar, the king told him, "None of my wise men can read the writing on the wall and tell me what it means. But if you can, I will give you riches and honor beyond your wildest dreams." Daniel answered the king, "You can keep your gifts and give them to someone else, but I will still read the writing for you and tell you what it means." Daniel told King Belshazzar, "God gave your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, absolute power, glory, and splendor. Because of this, all the nations of the earth feared him. He did as he pleased to help or hurt anyone he chose. But Nebuchadnezzar became proud and arrogant, so God stripped him of his throne and his power. Only after this did King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledge that God alone is king over all the earth. But you, King Belshazzar, Daniel continued, have not humbled yourself, even though you knew all of this. Instead, you have become proud and honored yourself above God. When you brought out the goblets from God's temple, you drank from them and praised false gods who cannot see or hear or understand. In all of this, you did not honor God or His hand in your life. Because of this, God sent the hand and wrote the inscription. My king, Daniel said, this the inscription says, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Mene means numbered. God has numbered your days and brought them to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the scales, and you have been found wanting. Parsin means divided. Your kingdom is divided and will be given to the Medes and Persians. Just as the king had promised, Daniel was dressed in wealth. That very night, King Belshazzar was killed, and his kingdom was given over to another ruler.
Well, that went south in a hurry, didn't it? You know, this story can teach us a lot about pride. Pride leads to a false self-confidence. While there's nothing wrong with being proud of your accomplishments, we must always remember who gave us the skills and talents that allowed us to perform so well. God has bestowed gifts on each and every one of us. Without Him, we would have nothing. Pride also really dishonors God. When we take all the credit for our accomplishments, we dishonor the work God has put into our lives. God has a plan for all of our lives, and He has blessed us in ways that make each one of us successful, not for our glory, but for His. Lastly, pride comes before a fall. This Bible story teaches us that pride comes before a fall. When our hearts are filled with pride, only bad things can come. But when we humble our hearts before the Lord, He will lift us up.
That leads us to our big idea for the day. Pride leads to destruction, but humility leads to honor. Now, does that mean it's okay for someone to humiliate you? Of course not. Humiliation and humility in this sense is not the same. It's never okay for someone to be sarcastic and mean to you or make you feel bad about yourself. That's not the kind of humility that we're talking about. Humility simply means to think of yourself under God. We know that God comes first, and whenever we humble ourselves, that makes sure that we don't let pride come before God. That's a pretty deep lesson, isn't it? Well, let's lighten the mood a little bit and go back to our memory verse to see if you remember what we learned. So, and you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all of this. Daniel 5:22. How did you do? I bet you did great. Can you please bow your heads with me so we can say a prayer? Dear God, thank you for all the blessings you bestow upon us. Help us to seek your wisdom as we live to achieve the plans you have for our lives. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Could this be the end of Daniel? I hope you will join us next week as we learn about what happens when Daniel is thrown into a den full of hungry lions.
Before we go, here is your QR code that's going to unlock your fun family devotional. Just have your parents scan it and enter the 6-digit password that's provided. Now, that is all the time we have for today. But until next week, stay humble, my friends. See you next time.